Yeah, awesome. Come prepared. All right, well, let's see if this is working. All right, yep, there we go. Well, welcome everybody. We really appreciate you coming out to the Washington County Heritage Center tonight, and to all of you here gathered in person, as well as you guys online, including my mom. My name is Emily Krupczewski. I am the site manager here at the Washington County Heritage Center. Joining us as well tonight is Brent Peterson. He's the executive director of the Washington County Historical Society. The Heritage Center is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you haven't come by to see us, definitely encourage you to do so. We also have the Warden's House Museum and Hay Lake School. Those are both open until the end of the month. So if you haven't gotten out there yet, they're closing at the end of the month because they're both very expensive to heat. But they have tours Thursday through Sunday for the Warden's House and Friday through Sunday for Hay Lake School in Scandia. We have several events coming up here at the Heritage Center. You can check our website for more details on all of those. The one that is most rapidly approaching, though, is our first ever Historic Grounds coffee tasting. That's happening this Saturday in this room. Several local and regional coffee shops will be participating. It is from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Some people can't function without coffee first thing in the morning, so that's why we are starting that early. Made Coffee from Stillwater will be here. Coffee Pod Cafe from Stillwater will also be here. Kodiak Coffee from Forest Lake, Starbucks, Dunn Brothers, and a couple more as well. We'll have coffee to taste, as well as a display of antique coffee items from our collection. The cost is $10 per person. Kids 10 and under are free and probably don't need coffee anyway. Attendees will receive a discounted admission to the museum, and all coffee will be first come, first served. For tonight, you guys are in for such a treat. Our favorite author, Patrick L. Shannon, is back with us, and he is the author of Minnesota's Headline Murders, 1900 to 1919. We have those available up at the front desk if you'd like to purchase them, and you can also buy them online as well. If you don't mind taking a moment to silence your cell phones, we would really appreciate that. And those of you on Zoom, just make sure that you're on mute if you would. For a brief introduction of the book, here we go. If you like true crime stories, you won't want to miss this book. Patrick L. Shannon tells the tales of 10 murders from Minnesota's history in the voice of someone involved in either the murder itself or the resulting trial. The cases are full of twists and turns, desperate schemers, jilted lovers, and all of the captivating peculiarities of people who commit murder, just with a historical twist. Shannon's accounts of the trials are extremely well-researched and told with excellent attention to historical detail. Shannon put his lifetime of police work to our benefit to bring back murder cases that covered the news headlines of the day. Shannon's cases will keep you up late as he brings you into the courtroom dramas that will stick in your mind well after you put down the book. So without further ado, I introduce Patrick L. Shannon.
Everybody. I was here in March and I really enjoyed it. This is a fantastic building that you have here. I do a little traveling, but this is got to be one of the best. Brent and we run a great show here. I want to start out. Was anyone here last time I spoke? Oh, okay. I would introduce myself. I'm formerly with, I used to be out of college. I worked federal narcotics in Chicago. I transferred to the BCA in Minnesota, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That is, if a small town like a murder, like Tower, Minnesota, I hope they don't, but the BCA would handle that. They don't have a homicide squad. They don't have a lab. Everything is comes out of St. Paul, and this is true about everything. So I worked there. I worked 8 years in death investigation, handled quite a few murders. After that, I took the job as security director of security at the racetrack, and then I went back to college and became a drug and alcohol counselor. Anyway, when I retired, I wanted to write something, and it was fun. I hung out at the various historical societies. The first one is a cast killed in 1917. Briefly, there's Alice McQuinlan, 26 years old. In August of 1914, she married 44-year-old widower Frank Dunn. Dunn was self-employed teamster, and he would, with his team pick up things from the railroad and bring it up to the post office or other buildings throughout the town of St. Paul. Once they were married, she moved into he had a room downtown, near downtown St. Paul. And he was gone sometimes 16 hours a day. Here this young woman was just sitting in the boarding house. And so the marriage lasted about 2 months. She moved back. She moved back.
You over under 2 months.
She moved back to her house at 793 Shelby. That's where her parents lived. And I think Quinlan Plumbers, I don't know if you're familiar with that in St. Paul, they're still operating. And that house is still there. Well, anyway, she tried many times to reconcile with marriage with Don. Don would have nothing of it. Both were of a religion that wouldn't accept divorce. And they went to court, and Don had to pay $70 a month to keep to his former bride of 2 months. He was irate.
Yes.
He was. He said he made $2,400 a year. The judge didn't believe him. So, she tried to get back together, and finally she took a job in Montana as a stenographer in 1916 and 17. Frank her husband had been there a year before. He was looking for land that he could invest in. She returned on April 1st, 1917, and contacted her husband. Her husband was glad to see her. All of a sudden, he changed like a new man. So they were meeting each other for drugstores and for walks. Now, there's kind of two stories. On April 24th, 1917, a car was flagged down for speeding at Washington and Union. That's over by the University of Minnesota. They flagged him down somehow, and the guy stopped. And they would pay their fine right there. And if they couldn't, well, these two guys said, "Hey, we just paid a fine, gave all our money to a St. Paul cop, and now you guys want to let us go." He said, "No, we can't do it." So what they did in those days, 1917, one of the police officers, there's three there, one got in the back seat, "We'll take you to the precinct, you're driving." So they're headed towards the east side precinct, and at 4 o'clock, the end of the shift, the man's name was George Connery. He didn't show up. They started looking for him, and they waited and waited and asking everybody, and they couldn't find him. They went to the watering holes. His wife was calling, and they were quite confused where he was. At 10 o'clock, they waited at 10 o'clock that night. They told headquarters, "Well, heck, they got a missing police officer for 8 hours here." So they got a big search of let's see. His wife and family were really the ones pushing this, but the cops thought, well, maybe he stopped for a coffee and a donut. But the next day, everybody's off. They said they had 500 people out. That's right. That's a picture of him right there. So. Next day, they found the car at the rec theater in St. Paul, and there's blood in the back seat. And, it was abandoned and it's stolen from La Crosse, Wisconsin. Nowadays, if you're stopped, they take your license, make sure there's no wants and warrants on it. They check the car that's not stolen. Of course, they didn't have computers or communication with headquarters at that time, so they couldn't do that. But so moving ahead here. Getting back to that story, on April 26th, at 1 in the morning, Alice Dunn and her sister, Kat. Alice was one who married Frank, and her little sister, about 10 years younger. They were sleeping in a double bed in their parents' home on Selby Avenue. There was some noise coming in, and I think I'll just read her sister's.
Just shut it. There you go.
her sister related to the police and it's later in trial, that I heard a noise like stairs creak. I asked if Jack, my brother, I got no answer. I called again, who is it? I got no answer. My sister said, go to sleep, Kat, you're dreaming. And she put her hand over my mouth. I saw a man step into the bedroom across the hall as I heard the noise in the hall, and I cried out, Alice, Alice, there's a man in the house. Then a man jumped right into the room. I clasped Alice in my arm and held her tight. The man said, be calm, be calm. All I want to do is a little shooting. I took off Alice's ring and put it in mine. The man flashed the light on us. He fired 3 shots. The man had a dark suit. His face was covered with a white handkerchief. He pushed me away from Alice. Her head bumped mine, but he pushed me away when he did the shooting. So evidently the shooter, Alice, who was married to Frank Dunn, was the target. Why weren't both sisters killed? Or what was the reason behind it? So they had usually on homicides, people who are the victims and the murderer know each other. They're very close. We just don't have guys. I know we hear about shooting a rifle at strangers, but generally in murder cases, they know each other. So they contacted Frank, who was at the Knights of Columbus that night, and he was covered for his alibi. He showed not much empathy or sorrow when he found out his wife was murdered. So he took him downtown. And he told him, asked him who would. Now, in a homicide, you always want to go, intentional homicide. She was the only one, and you have to ask, who would gain from her death? Who would gain from her death? Well, Frank Dunn's the only one. He's out, he saves $70 a month. That's all. It's all awesome.
It's all money.
Well, there's some women who think pretty good at this too.
Yeah.
Okay. And the killer knew exactly where to go. He knew the diagram of the house. And that's her, that's the house. That's what diagram. There's 3 guys involved, and one of them they went into the kitchen window, they cut the phone line, and they went up, they all went upstairs, 2 at the top of the stairs, kept the other family members away, and one of them did the shooting. That's her health. I got a bounce forward here. Catherine, who was a little sister, she grew up in state in St. Paul, Mendota, Montemita. Well, anyway, I got a hold of her. I called her and said, I'd like to interview you about excuse me, it's Catherine's daughter. And I'd like to interview you about how your mom lived. And she said, just barely. I don't want to talk about it. It's all done. It's over the hill. So I wasn't very aggressive with her. She was an elderly woman and just didn't want to talk about it. So I respected that. I left it there. But she said her mom had twin length problems that, and I don't think they had the medical services, psychiatric services they do now that possibly I help somebody that's trying that. But honestly, if someone told these killers where to go, and the only person who identified this benefit would be Frank Dunn. Somehow they got an informant who was drinking with us, so-and-so, and he said the 3 guys involved with Joe Redbach, Frank McCool, and John Doyle. These 3 guys are from out of town. And this is Frank Dunn. How they could have teamed up with Frank Dunn. Frank Dunn's a St. Paul guy. And 3 days after the murder, an ex-wife of a man in Montana said that Dunn offered her husband in 1915 to kill his wife. He gave him $5,000. Give him his rent. Ex-wife, great source of information. Anyway, the 2 men were the police went out there. They said, yeah, took them back to St. Paul, and their story was Dunn gave us $4,000 they got to the border where his wife lived on Sylvia. And he said they sleep in the first room.
Can I move your mic over just?
There it is. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's where they live in. That's where the murder happened.
The home's okay.
Yes, it is. It's changed into a duplex now, upstairs and stuff. Downstairs, one person lives in, I think there's 3 rooms upstairs. Yeah. It was for sale one time. I went through it. That's why. Okay, so I get this distracted. So they said these 3 guys, they're all from out of town. And so they asked them about it. I don't know these people. But these guys from Montana came and told the police here, made a statement that, yeah, he offered us $5,000. And she took us over to his house where her wife lives. And they said, hey, pal, we're not murderers, we're blackmailers. No, give us that $5,000 and we'll leave, go back to Montana. We're not killing anyone. Well, there's Frank is. He gave him $4,000. That's all he had. And they came back 3 months later, gave him $400 more. So anyway, that pretty much put Frank Don, who had been in jail, that's the murder, pretty much indicted him. Now on May 15th, 12 days after the murder, Officer Connery's body was found in a deserted location in Philly. Uniform was tattered, no gun, pockets were torn off. The Minneapolis mayor offered $420 reward, and the cops pass they had $50 more. Now, it said there was a tire mark there. The .44 caliber weapon that was stolen from the officer was the same type of weapon that killed Mrs. Dunn. And he found the 2 guys. They identified the 2 guys, McCool and Redenbach, were the murderers of this police officer. He tried to write a goodbye to his family in the dirt, but scribbling. They got the message that he was thinking. Now these tire marks too, I don't know how they did in 1917, but we used to take a square box, empty and no sides, just a square, and put it over the tire mark. And what you do, you put hairspray on all over and tighten up that tire mark so dust it doesn't move. And you put plastic pairs, put that all in that box there. And that hardened. And when you harden up, take the box up and take that hardened plastic pairs off, and you got a print, a footprint of the tire. I don't know how they did it, but they said they massively evidently took the tire from off the tire, drove that car out there, and put that in the tire. And with the blood in the back seat, with McCool and Redenbach identified, they feel they were near arrest, but the fact is they probably scrambled from out of town, which they did. On May 3rd, McCool was arrested in his hometown in North Nebraska. That's a funeral, large crowd. I don't know the name of the church. It was on Randolph Avenue in St. Paul Catholic Church. Long gone, been replaced. That's Redenbach right there. That's him. There has been cool. He's been in prison 3 years when this was taken. So anyway, McCool, he's arrested down there, and he doesn't say anything. So they bring him back to Minnesota. He must have told him, because they found a week later, they found Redenbach was arrested in San Francisco. They used to tell him type information and then maybe send a photo if they had to have them. They didn't have photos of these guys. The population was such that the police kind of knew a stranger when he came in town. So Redenbach was, he started talking, but he stopped talking. He finally, back in Minneapolis, had McCool sitting sweat room where you kind of start sweating. It's very hot in there and the food is not so good. And you can't do this anymore. But they did then. And he said, okay, tell you what happened. Redenbach and I were riding. And the cop was going to arrest us. And so Redenbach had a gun in his hand. And he turned around and hit a bump and the gun went off and hit the cop in the leg. We get to this deserted area that we think the cop, we're going to leave him there. The cop got tough. Started beating on us. And so we have beat him. Like he finally died in death. He didn't mean to, but that's what happened. So then he said, yeah, he was not the killer at that Mrs. Dunn, but he was familiar with it. So they got Redenbach back in Minneapolis and said, hey, cool, spill the beans here. And we want to, we're going to arrest you and your wife. He was 19, his wife was 18. Now they love each other. So they said, you're both going to prison for life. But if you want to talk, testify against these other guys, we'll leave your wife. She can skip on that. So he took the deal. And he pled guilty and told the story about Don offered. He was introduced, well, I heard about Don through a criminal of his who knew a bartender in St. Paul, Chickens. So the bartender got a hold of Redenbach, who stopped in one day. He said, hey, it's done, give you $5,000 if he kills his wife. Redenbach said he wasn't interested, but he came back about 4 months later with McCool and said, yeah, we're interested in it now. So the bartender, his name is Mike Moore. He said, hooked him up with Dunn, and Dunn told him, look, I'll be at a grocery store, a drugstore here in next Sunday at 4 o'clock. Be there and take a good look at my wife. That's the one I want you to hit. So he was there. Dunn and his wife were there. Freeman's drugs, and he pointed. So she was with Dunn, and so Redenbach knew what the lady looked like. So it was McCool, and they came in with another friend of his. All these guys met in prison. They go back to those days, reformatories. No. One was from Kansas, one was from Washington, the other was from Nebraska. And some, but they traveled a lot. They got to know each other. So they got a guy by the name of John Bell, the third. He called himself Tacoma Johnny. Anyway, that's what he called himself. We all had to have names. Redenbach said that Tacoma and McCool stood at the top of the stairs, and why he did the shooting. And Redenbach was 19 years old, 5'6". He testified at the trial, so I'll step forward to. There's McCool when he's from McCool. Redenbach testified to McCool, even though he hired McCool. McCool got 2 life sentences. One in Minneapolis for the police officer, and one in St. Paul for Mrs. Dunn. So that was about 20 years that he served, and now with his age, and he had to serve another 20 to 30 for the St. Paul. So he wound up. McCool died in prison in 1943 at the age of 52. Of his 52 years on earth, he spent 29 years in prison before he was brought in. So the next one was Frank Dunn. Redenbach was a big witness against him, and he was found guilty and given life. Frank Dunn. That's Mike Moore. Mike Moore was also found guilty and given life. He was a bartender who was a guy. Well, that's Johnny Doyle, who they couldn't find. Yeah, Tacoma Johnny. They couldn't find him, so they couldn't arrest him. But you would think, if you call yourself Tacoma Johnny, you might want to stay out of Tacoma, not Johnny. So they said, So they said he had changed his name and everything, but couldn't change his appearance. So he was arrested and found guilty, and he spent his rest of his life in prison. Let's see. He went, but they had a problem that they called stir crazy. He died at St. Peter's Hospital in 1945, age 70. He spent 28 years in prison. Tacoma John, right here. That's him in 1919, 1941. He too had mental health problems, and he died at the age of 70 in Hastings, with a mental institution. He spent his entire life there. No one had visited and wrote him a letter in the last 7 years of his life. Ben Bach had, that's done there. Yeah,
My apologies.
oh, hi, thank you. Yeah, that was one of the last pictures taken. Now this is Redenbach. The real name they said it was Hamilton. Now that's when he first came in, and that's when they let him out. He was 64 years old. He spent 45 years of his life. That woman who said, if you don't arrest her, I'll testify against those other guys. She divorced him 25 years previous to this. So that's him. He had a sister in Portland, and he went to live there. He worked as a machinist and died 5 years after. So that's a cast of characters. Just so bad that a young, beautiful woman was killed by these burglaries, or they didn't know what they were doing. Downstairs the rest of the way. I met a woman who, during the Dunn trial, a little girl became very ill, and her dad was on the jury, and she was not going to make it. So they asked the judge, "Can you let the jury go home and say goodbye to the little girl?" They said, "No, don't do it." 1917, they didn't do it. So the little girl died. It was a weekend of Saturday, so he got to go home because there's no trial. And they brought her out to a cemetery and put her in a temporary plot till this case was over with. And then once it's over with, they did put it in a permanent spot. But it's a little tough. They just went by the book. Yeah. Especially like the movies like done, but they don't want to give any reason to have it in trial. God bless that little girl. Just hard to. That's him. Well, any questions on those guys?
Now, was the Rittenbach or Hamilton, is he the one who's a direct descendant from Alexander Hamilton?
No. Oh, who is that? Oh, yeah, Hamilton. He was the one who. Boy, you got a good memory. He killed a guy by the name of Day, who was a millionaire in Minneapolis. And was a guy. He's a newspaper reporter. Sorry, I got wrong. I get rid of everybody here. I just got one more. This is a butcher murder in 1905. In 1905, the population of St. Paul was 196,000, and they had 196,000 people, and 205 police officers. In 1905, they walked or rode a horse. So that was about one officer per 950 people. In 2022, we have 305,000 people live in St. Paul, and they have 600, 3 times as they did, 620 people, which is about 1 officer per 500 people. So they're very down. You just can't get guys to be cops anymore, especially in a major metropolitan area. You can in a rich suburb, but you can't very well get them and go in the city anymore. It's just too chaotic. And after this George Floyd thing. Well, on Saturday, February 18th, 1905, was a busy shopping day in St. Paul, especially in West 7th, where Shingle Decker meat market was, at 523 West 7th Street. At 12:40 that day, assistant came home. He walked home on a break to have his lunch and come back, the front door was locked. And so he went around the back and he saw that his boss, Christian Shannon, was murdered. He was, whoever did it took a cleaver to him. Now the police, money was taken from the till and from the man's pocket. It looks like there's a terrible fight in the place. The blood all over. Front door is locked, nailed shut. There's a hammer left there at the crime scene with the initial CH on it. And about $100 is taken from the cash register and Mr. Shingle. Now, the investigation today, we have DNA, which if you touch something almost, you can leave your DNA. It's very good, very, very accurate. There's no fingerprints, no blood samples. Now they can, with all that blood, they'll try to hopefully be 2 types of blood. One would be the murderer and one would be the victim. But they didn't have that then. There's no cameras. In this case, there's no witness. The brutal murder and an overkill. Overkill. Yes, sir.
And what year approximately the Twin Cities did they adopt using fingerprints?
That's a good question. About 1990. The problem is with fingerprints, you couldn't send many. They'd say, who are these? The FBI started in about 1927. In the late 20s, they had a national headquarters for Washington, D.C. for fingerprints. But they could put the local people fingerprint. That's what these guys did. You brought up an interesting topic. They'd be arrested in St. Paul and tell them, my name's John Smith, and they'd be arrested in Minneapolis, and my name's Dan Jones. They didn't know. So it was, if it's a serious, if it's just a misdemeanor, guy let go. And what they depended upon is usually the clerk of court recognize guys. That's not Dan Jones. That's all. The judge who didn't have that. So again, most murders, as I said before, were done by people who know each other. But this was a murder that was for obviously money and plots up whole. It later came out in testimony that the guy went in and asked for eggs, and he's supposed to go into some kind of man-made cooler there, and then he's going to lock him in it. But he had the eggs on the counter, so he went to the eggs. The guy hit him over the head with a hammer and started beating him. And the tough customer is Mr. Shingle that gave him a fight. So they said, you know, who's the closest guy to this? Well, it's his assistant. So they brought him in again and said, tell us everything that happened. And he said, well, I'll tell you, I walked home and I saw a guy named Ed. He was talking to a younger guy there, and that's all I know. Who's that? I don't know. He's a tough guy. Stay away from him. So they talked to their beat. The beat police were the best in the world at the time. They knew all the bad kids. They all know. They just knew everybody in the neighborhood. And people gossiped to them. They picked up all that information. So they said, yeah, this guy's name is Ed Gossett, and he lives at 480 Goodhue. So they were continuing on with all these. The whole town was in the panic of St. Paul because we got a murder with a cleavers running around. So they went over to Gossett's house. That's Mr. Shannon there, 35 years old. And that's the day after the murder. That's his meat market. Right there now is Mancini's. Yeah. And you're that down, Mancini. That's what inside of a meat market looked like. It happened in the back room. I don't know if it was girls or. That's back room of all this happened. And that's a hammer with a CH on it. And then that's how the newspaper explained how it happened. Yeah. So, yeah. See, that's a hammer. Yeah.
That wasn't too smart.
Oh, well, you're not dealing with it.
Did he use both the hammer and the meat cleaver on the guy?
Knock them down with the, yeah.
Oh.
The guy fought back and grabbed the cleaver, got him in the neck, he went down. And he kept getting hit. And the thought by the police was because he recognized this guy, he knows this guy. So the guy had to kill him. So they bring Gossick down to the jail. So I have a picture. Well,
Trade the other, yeah.
that's Gossick right there. They bring Gossick down to the jail. And they started asking questions. He becomes quite defensive. He said he's home all day. And so O'Connor, the chief of police, sent a couple of detectives over to Gossick's house, rooming house, went to his room. They got some clothes that had recently washed. They got some money in a teacup, about $20 in silver, a pistol. They got some fishing knives and some identification. So they brought that back, but they're very interested. It says, Gossick, that you looks like they got blood in your pants here. Said, no, that is blood, but it's from fish. But Pretty Gossick said he did because he's a tinner, he's a mechanic. He cleans out kerosene containers, and he also was, most income was from fish. Gossick, so they talked to the landlord and said, hey, where was Gossick the other day in the murder? She said, he left around 11 o'clock with a young guy. He got back about 10:40. So, because Gossick was lying, they kept him in jail. They took the pants to a chemist. A chemist at the time was a pharmacist, also. He's a chemist, pharmacist. They said, try to find out if it's human blood. So I said, I'll give it a try. And that day too, that the mayor put out a reward for $1,000 for information to the rest of the killer, Mr. Shannon. So the investigation showed that Gossick used to hang around with another fisherman by the name of Joe Hartman, and they found out where he lived. Again, it's all beat work. The beat policeman who kind of knew things in the neighborhood. And they went over to Hartman's house, and Mrs. Hartman said, no, we haven't seen him for a week. Last Monday, he asked for a nickel to go on a trolley. I wouldn't give it to him. I haven't seen him since. So they don't know what happened for him. They asked, how about this hammer, CH? Dad said, yeah, that's my hammer. That's my initials, Charles Hartman. So now they're getting someplace. Hartman, still there's much pressure by the people in St. Paul to get this solved. And they finally filed a complaint on Gossick. They said that chemist, he said, I'm pretty sure that's human blood. I'm pretty sure. Investigation that he also showed that they paid $5 to his landlord, and they paid off his grocery bill after the murder. And he was seen at the scene of the murder. So that's probable cause he did it. So I don't know if they get away with that today, but there was a letter written out this. Read it to the St. Paul Pioneer Press. The public is becoming sick and tired of the daily report of opinions, theories, and suspicions by the police department created before there was facts. It goes on to say that Gossick is not getting a fair deal. How can a man be in prison because he pays his landlord a grocery after murder that's been committed in his community? Should he be thrown in a dungeon because there are dark stains in his overalls? It continues. If it were human blood, would it prove in this case it was Shingle-Decker blood, not the prisoner? They didn't have instruments to determine that. So this was written by a man in St. Paul. It's just pretty much irate about the fact that the way music gods have been treated. On March 17th, the body of Joseph Hartman popped up in Lake Pike Lake near the Mississippi River near St. Paul. He had 2 flat irons. He was hit over the head with one, and then there's 2 flat irons tied to his legs. So he was killed and thrown in the river. I don't know what flat irons are. I tried to look it up. It's something to do with fishing. I think they're kind of like I don't know.
Like heavy weights.
Yeah, very heavy, like kind of like an anchor. But if 1905, as fisherman, I don't know. But so his brother found out of it. Gossick's brother went to jail that his friend Joe Hartman was killed. They said he didn't bother him a bit. His best friend, he didn't even blink. So his brother told that to him. And so Monday, the day of the trial, it's going to be 10 o'clock. They're going to jury trial. This is Hartman's, that's picture of Hartman at the morgue. At the morgue, and that's at 606 James House, where he lives. And now that's gone. They had a viewing there, and then from there they went to the church, St. Francis de Sales, and off West 7th St. Paul, and they buried in Calvary Church Cemetery. But they're going to have a trial, and Gossick, as an attorney, says we're going to withdraw our statement that we're not guilty. We're going to plead guilty. Well, the whole room went nuts. I got it back up here. This was really going to be the trial of the century for the St. Paul people. They didn't have radio or TV most of them. So we got there early, and there's a big mess getting into that jury room, and not jury room, in the courtroom. They were saying that they called the men streetcar men. That means men on streetcar didn't offer their seat to the ladies. They said the streetcar men showed up at the courtroom too. Their fights, it took 6 deputies to get everything down. It's just a free for all there. But anyway, things got settled down. Gotcha comes in and says, no, I was guilty with the exception. And Gotcha says, look, I guess I'm guilty because I was a lookout for Hartman. Hartman went in there and hit the guy over the head with a hammer. He's supposed to get some eggs, and then killed him, locked the door and killed him. And then he said that Hartman and he were fishing that following Monday, and that Hartman was going to kill him. So he's coming out of a rock, big rock, and so he got a rock and killed him himself and threw him in the lake with those flat irons on. Well, Judge Lewis said, sure he did. Yeah, they sentenced Gossick to be hung. And we had to be done. And the governor, John A. Johnson at the time, said you have to wait 2 months. So they had to wait till August 8th before they could hang him. Now, in those days, it took money to that's the sheriff right there. He got $500, the sheriff did, for building a scaffold, making a coffin, putting a suit on this guy, buying the rope, paying the guy to string it up. But anything over that he didn't spend, the sheriff could keep. So the sheriff was thinking, I can $800 a year. Like that's and so Gossick heard about this. One of the judges said, yeah, the sheriff was happy. He heard $500. So they put a 24-hour watch on Cossack. Hanging sounds that you don't see it. So they got 24/7 all day. They get to July 20th, 19 days before the hanging. And Phil Martin, he told the guys, he was the deputy who was watching the concert. He said, I'm going home for lunch. About 1 o'clock, the deputy walked by Cossack's cell and they found him hanging. Well, there's a little thing sticking out, kind of a projection from the bars. And he cut a rib mattress down and made a rope out of it, hung himself, took off his boots, and hung himself. Well, they were under $500. Anyway, Neeson was awful upset about it. The autopsy showed a thick frontal skull on, which was not normal, probably criminal. They had a hard time finding a cemetery that would take Cossack. Finally, they went way up in on Roselawn, I guess it's on Arbor and Shannon, which is a long way. So they threw him in the back of the wagon, got up there. There was a hole dug for him with a couple of guys waiting. Threw him in the hole, put the dirt on top of him, and threw him off. I went there to see, and there's no headstone there. I don't think anyone's.
So they just put him in the ground?
Yeah.
No casket or?
I think there was some type of casket they used to, so they didn't spend much money on it. They probably made I'm finishing up here. The $1,000 reward was put out in February of 1905 for the killing of the meat market. That was in 1905. 2021, there was a 6-year-old girl who was shot in North Minneapolis. She was riding in her mom's car. They come down to McDonald's, they got a block away, and some stray bullets in there. The next day, Crime Stoppers put out a reward for $1,000. So I wrote a letter to the paper, got in there. How can we only for $1,000 an innocent child? It's now up to 180, but I was hoping that I wrote these guys, these 2 candidates for governor, that maybe spend some money on them. Because these guys are scared, especially as part of a gang in North Minneapolis. But maybe some money, a couple of $250,000, $500,000 will shake a boost to get these guys off the streets. So that's Neeson, and that's Phil Martin. Neeson was not re-elected. Martin was fired. And that's it. They blame the Democrats for it's
Dinner.
just
We got the flat irons, straighten your hair.
yeah.
They don't have anything.
I know. I looked
Picture.
before I came in.
Yeah.
Looked like I was talking about. I couldn't find it. Well, that's it. If there's any questions, thank you very much for the.
Of course, we do have books for sale as well.